At a family dinner table, my parents and perfect sister tore my dreams to shreds between bites of roasted chicken. "You'll never be successful like your sister," they laughed. Those words became my fuel. My revenge wasn't just proving them wrong, it was building an empire so magnificent that their mockery would echo in the ruins of their own failures. This is my story of how I turned their laughter into the most expensive mistake they would ever make. My name is Ava. I still remember that night like it's tattooed in my memory. The smell of roasted chicken, the sound of crystal glasses clinking, and the way my stomach twisted because I knew, deep down, that the laughter wasn't meant for me. Mom had gone all out for dinner that night. Candles lit, wine bottles uncorked, and my dad sitting at the head of the table like some kind of king. My sister Melissa sat right beside him, glowing like she always did. You know the type, perfect hair, perfect job, perfect smile that made everyone believe she had her life figured out. And then there was me. Sitting across the table, pretending to chew, pretending to belong. Melissa had just finished bragging about another promotion. "So yeah," she said, brushing her hair over her shoulder, "the company decided to make me regional manager. It's not easy managing 3 branches, but I guess hard work really pays off." Dad clapped like she'd just cured cancer. "That's my girl. Always making us proud." Mom leaned in with that soft, sugary smile. "Honestly, Melissa, you've always had that spark. Ever since you were little. You just knew how to make things happen." Their eyes turned toward me. It wasn't even subtle. Just that lingering pause that said, "And you don't." I tried to look busy cutting my chicken. "That's great, Mel," I said, forcing a smile. "Congrats." She turned to me, that fake sympathy dripping from her voice. "Thanks, sis. So, what are you up to these days? Still working on your computer thing?" I swallowed hard. "It's called Pixel Nest. It's a web design platform I've been building. It's going slow but..." Dad laughed before I could finish. "Pixel what?" "Honey, that's not a job. That's a hobby. You've been on that laptop for 2 years, and not one paycheck to show for it." Mom sighed like I was some kind of burden. "You could at least look for something stable. Melissa's been helping with groceries, with bills, maybe you can start contributing too." My hands tightened around my fork. "I will. I just need more time." Melissa chuckled. "More time? Girl, you've had plenty. Maybe you're just not built for this whole success thing." The room went quiet for a beat, and then Dad laughed, loud, carefree. "You'll never be successful like your sister," he said, shaking his head. And they laughed. All of them. Even Mom tried to stifle her giggle behind her napkin. I felt my throat close up. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but the words just wouldn't come. I just sat there, nodding, pretending it didn't hurt, pretending their laughter didn't slice right through me. When dinner ended, I went upstairs without saying a word. When I got back to my room that night, I didn't even turn on the light. I just shut the door behind me and stood there, still hearing their laughter echoing down the hallway like it was following me. It's strange how a sound can hurt more than a slap. That laughter wasn't just noise, it was every word they'd ever said about me, rolled into one cruel melody. My chest felt tight. I tried to breathe, but it came out shaky. I sat on my bed, staring at my reflection in the dark window. The moonlight hit my face just enough for me to see the tears I was pretending not to cry. And then it hit me, the wave. You know that kind of crying you can't control. The one that starts with a small sniffle and then explodes from somewhere deep, like your soul is cracking open. Yeah, that one. I pressed my hands over my face and just let it all out. Every ounce of hurt I'd been swallowing for months poured out. The shame, the disappointment, the endless comparisons to my sister, the way Mom looked at me like I was wasting my life, all of it came crashing down. I wanted to scream, why can't I be enough? Why couldn't they see I was trying, really trying? But all that came out was silence and the sound of my sobs bouncing off the walls of a room that suddenly felt too small, too cold, too full of memories of a family that didn't believe in me. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made. The late nights coding until my eyes burned. The freelance jobs I'd taken just to buy the parts one needed. The dreams I'd buried so I could focus on this one thing that gave my life meaning. And still they laughed. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, eyes swollen, whispering to myself like a prayer, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm wasting my life. For a moment, just a moment, I almost believed it. I almost let their words win. But something inside me refused to die. It was small, like a spark flickering in the dark. But it was there, that stubborn little voice that whispered, no. Not like this. I sat up, wiped my face, and turned toward my laptop. The screen light hit my face, and in that glow, I felt something shift. All the pain, all the humiliation, it turned into fuel. I opened a blank document and started typing lines of code, my fingers trembling, tears still falling. I didn't care how tired I was. I didn't care if the world doubted me. Because in that moment, I made a promise to myself. One day they were going to regret every laugh, every word, every time they called me a failure. One day they'd see my name and realize that the girl they dismissed built something they couldn't even imagine. And I worked until my eyes blurred, until my tears dried on my cheeks. That night I didn't sleep. That was the night I broke. And the night I began again. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever had someone laugh at your dreams, then you know exactly how I felt that night. The sting of humiliation, the fire of determination, and the quiet promise that someday, they'll regret not believing in you. But this story isn't just about hurt feelings. It's about what happens when people push you too far, and the revenge that comes when they least expect it. Stay with me, let me show you just how far my family was willing to go to crush my dreams, and how I turned the tables on them in a way they never saw coming. It had been 3 weeks since that dinner. 3 long, quiet weeks where no one in the house spoke about what happened, but everyone felt it. The tension hung in the air like smoke you couldn't escape. I'd been keeping to myself, waking up early, working late, living off coffee and stubbornness. Every click of my keyboard felt like defiance. They thought I was wasting my time. I was proving them wrong, line by line, design by design. But one evening, as I was coding, I heard a knock on my door. Not the soft kind. The kind that carries authority. Come in, I said, half dreading it. Dad walked in first, arms crossed, Mom right behind him. And then, of course, Melissa, hovering in the hallway like she couldn't wait to witness the next chapter of my humiliation. Dad cleared his throat. We need to talk. I closed my laptop slowly. About what? Mom sighed. About this situation. My heart sank. I already knew where this was going. Dad didn't waste time. You've been living here for 2 years since you dropped out. You don't pay rent. You don't contribute to the bills. And quite frankly, it doesn't look like you're even trying to find a real job. I felt the sting in his words, sharp and deliberate. I am working, Dad. I'm building something. It just takes time. Melissa scoffed from the door. Takes time. It's been years, girl. You're always working on something. Maybe it's time to admit this little fantasy isn't going anywhere. I looked at her, perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect condescension. Thanks for the advice, Melissa. She smiled sweetly. Just being realistic. Mom stepped forward, her voice softer but still cutting. Honey, your father's right. We can't keep supporting you forever. You're not a child anymore. Either you start contributing to the household, or you'll need to find somewhere else to stay. The words hit harder than I expected. Find somewhere else to stay. My stomach twisted. I'd always known they didn't believe in me, but to hear them say it like that, like I was a stranger they were tired of hosting, it broke something inside me. So that's it? I asked, my voice trembling. After everything? You're kicking me out because I'm not like her? Dad shook his head. No, we're not kicking you out. We're giving you a choice. Either grow up and take responsibility, or move on. Melissa crossed her arms, her lips curling into that smug half-smile. It's about time someone said it. I felt my hands trembling, but I refused to let them see me fall apart. I nodded slowly, forcing my voice to stay calm. Fine. I'll contribute. Dad raised an eyebrow. You will? Yes, I said. Give me 1 month. He hesitated. And what happens after a month? I looked him dead in the eye. After a month, I'll start paying rent. In full. On time. Every single month. Melissa chuckled under her breath. Sure you will. I ignored her. Because she didn't know what I knew, that I was this close to something big. That the small business owner I'd been designing for had just introduced me to an investor interested in what I was building. They saw a failure sitting in her bedroom. What they didn't see was a woman on the edge of a breakthrough. When they left, the door clicked shut behind them, and I just sat there, shaking. Anger, fear, humiliation, it all swirled inside me. But beneath it all was resolve. If they wanted me to pay rent, fine. I'd pay it and then some. They thought they were forcing me out, but really, they were lighting the fire that would burn my limits to ash. That night, I made myself another promise, 1 month. 30 days. That's all I needed to prove them wrong. Have you ever felt that pressure of a ticking clock? When every second counts because your entire future is hanging in the balance. That was me for the next 4 weeks. Every moment became precious, every effort amplified by desperation. After they left my room that night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Their voices kept replaying in my head like a song I hated but couldn't turn off. You'll never be successful like your sister. Either contribute or move out. I kept hearing it, over and over. So, I did the only thing I knew how to do, I worked. Days turned into nights, nights into early mornings. The glow from my laptop became the only light in my world. I started skipping breakfast, sometimes even dinner, just to save time. My body was exhausted, but my mind was alive. Every time my eyes felt heavy, I reminded myself, you've got 30 days. 30 days to prove them wrong. 30 days to make something out of nothing. Pixel Nest wasn't just a dream anymore, it was survival. I'd been working on this idea for over a year, a design platform that made it easy for small businesses to build websites using templates powered by AI. But I'd never finished it. I was too scared. Too uncertain. Now I didn't have the luxury of fear. I started emailing local shop owners, offering to build their sites for free, just so I could test the product. I worked on my code until my fingers cramped. I redesigned the logo 5 times. I fixed bugs at 3 a.m. with tears in my eyes and caffeine in my veins. And while I was fighting to keep my dream alive, life kept hitting back. One afternoon, Dad knocked on my door again. Can you run to the store and pick up a few things? Your sister's busy. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, I'm busy too. I'm working. But I just nodded, grabbed my keys and went. Because I knew arguing wouldn't change anything. Not yet. That night, Melissa stopped by my room. She leaned against the doorframe with her arms crossed, watching me type. "Still on that laptop, huh?" I didn't answer. She smirked. "You know, I actually envy your persistence. I mean, it's kind of cute, watching you chase something that'll never work out." Something inside me twisted, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. I just said, "Good night, Melissa," and kept typing. She laughed softly, walking away. "Good night, dreamer." When she closed the door, I let out a shaky breath. My hands were trembling, but I kept going. Because if there was one thing I refused to let them take from me, it was my focus. And then, it happened. Around 2 a.m., as I was testing a new feature, my inbox pinged. It was an email from a man named Evan Carter. He was the owner of a small bakery I'd built a demo site for. The subject line said, "Loved your work, let's talk partnership." My heart stopped. I opened it immediately. He wrote, "Hi, I've been showing your platform to a few friends in my small business network. We're impressed. I think there's real potential here. Would you be open to meeting an investor I know? He's been looking to support tech startups that help small businesses go digital." I just stared at the screen, frozen. My hands covered my mouth, and the tears I'd been holding back all week finally fell, but this time, they weren't from pain. They were from relief. For the first time in years, it felt like the universe had stopped laughing at me and started listening. I didn't sleep that night either, but for a different reason. I stayed up refining my pitch deck, designing mock-ups, rehearsing what I'd say if I actually got to meet this investor. Every keystroke felt like a heartbeat. Every design felt like hope. And by sunrise, I realized something. They'd pushed me to my limit, and that's exactly where I found my strength. If you've ever been pushed to your breaking point, you know that feeling, when you suddenly realize that pressure isn't crushing you, it's forging you into something stronger. Something unstoppable. Then drop a comment on this video. I still remember the night I told them. It was 2 weeks after I got that email, the one that said a small tech investor wanted to schedule a video call to discuss Pixel Nest. I must have read it 10 times, hands trembling, heart racing. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, my hard work was finally paying off. So that night, during dinner, I decided to share the news. My voice shook as I said, "Mom, Dad, I think Pixel Nest might finally get its first investor." The table went silent. Forks paused mid-air. Melissa's perfectly manicured eyebrow arched. "Investor," she repeated, like I'd just said I'd been hired by NASA. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "A small one, but it's something. They found my prototype online and want to talk about funding. I have a meeting next week." Dad set his phone down and exhaled. "You've said that kind of thing before, Ava. What happened to that project from last year?" "That was different," I replied, forcing a smile. "This version actually works. I've fixed everything. I think this could." Melissa snorted. "So let me get this straight. Someone wants to pay you for that little pixel app you've been fiddling with in your room." "It's not just an app," I said sharply. "It's a design platform. For virtual collaboration." "For broke dreamers," she interrupted with that smirk that always made my skin crawl. "Please, Ava, it sounds like one of those pyramid scheme ideas that never go anywhere." Mom giggled behind her glass of wine. Dad shook his head, almost amused. That laughter, their laughter, it hit me harder than I expected. But this time, I didn't cry or flinch. I just said, quietly, "You'll see." Melissa leaned forward, still grinning. "So what's this investor's name?" "Maybe I know him. Brian goes to tons of tech events, maybe they've met." "Brian. Her slick, startup boyfriend who loved talking about his innovations and seed rounds. I hesitated. Something in my gut told me not to share too much. But a part of me, the stupid, hopeful part still craving my family's approval, spoke up. His name's Richard Hale, I said. He runs a small investment firm. He scouts early-stage concepts for funding. Melissa nodded slowly, swirling her wine like she was processing something important. Interesting. Congrats, I guess. That night, I went to bed smiling for the first time in months. I actually prayed, thanking God for this chance to finally prove them wrong. I rehearsed my pitch, reworked my demo slides, and imagined what it would feel like to finally have them proud of me. But 3 days later, everything shattered. The email came mid-afternoon. Dear Ava, after reviewing your concept again, we've decided to pass on funding Pixel Nest. Unfortunately, a similar platform was recently submitted to us by another team under development. We wish you the best. My vision blurred. I reread it 3 times. Another team. Similar platform. That couldn't be right. I clicked the link attached to the message, and my blood ran cold. It was Pixel Nest. My Pixel Nest. Every line of code, every color, every single feature, but under a new name, Nest Space, developed by Melissa Stone and Brian Carter. My sister. My own sister. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening as tears filled my eyes. I stumbled downstairs, shaking, clutching my laptop like it was the last piece of my soul. Melissa was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone, legs crossed casually like the world revolved around her. How could you? I shouted. You stole my idea. She blinked lazily. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. Nest Space, that's my project. You took my prototype, my code, my designs, everything. She gave a smug little laugh. Oh, that. Relax, Ava. I didn't steal anything. I just told Brian about what you were working on, and he thought it had potential. We developed our own version. That's how the real world works. Your own version. I screamed. You copied everything. You used my files. She shrugged. Maybe you should have kept your laptop closed, genius. Mom and Dad appeared in the doorway, alarmed. What's going on here? Dad asked. I turned to him, desperate. Dad, she stole my project. She gave it to her boyfriend's company, the one she just launched. Melissa folded her arms, smirking. She's overreacting again. It's not her idea anymore. She didn't even have a patent or trademark. She just likes pretending to be a tech genius. Mom sighed. Ava, honey, maybe you should have been more careful. You know how these things go. My mouth fell open. You're taking her side. Dad just shook his head. Ava, if you'd been more serious about your life, maybe no one could have taken advantage of you. That broke something in me. Melissa stood up, brushing imaginary dust off her jeans. Don't worry, sis. When Nest Space takes off, maybe I'll hire you. You can do something simple, maybe handle customer support. They laughed. All 3 of them. Their laughter filled the room like poison. I stood there, shaking, my heart in pieces. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to disappear. But instead I turned around, went upstairs, and closed my door. I sat in the dark, staring at my laptop, the same one that held every late-night dream, every piece of code I'd poured myself into. My chest burned with humiliation, rage, and grief all tangled together. And then, softly, I whispered to myself. You think you broke me. But you just gave me a reason to rise. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry either. I just opened a new project file, blank, empty, waiting, and started building again. Not out of hope this time. Out of revenge. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, you know that hollow feeling in your chest. That moment when you realize the people who should protect you are the ones who hurt you most. But here's what they didn't understand: sometimes when you push someone too far, you create exactly what you feared most, someone who has nothing left to lose. The house felt smaller the morning I left. Not because the walls had shrunk, but because everything I'd ever been told about myself lived inside them: the pitying glances, the little jokes at family gatherings, the way my parents' eyes slid off me like I was furniture. I had saved up a little money from freelance gigs, and those 5 clients I'd picked up while I was still sleeping in my old room. Not much, barely enough to make a dent, but it was mine. I counted it on the kitchen table like currency in a countdown: $1,200. A deposit, a month's rent, a prayer. Melissa watched me pack my bag with that same half-amused expression she always wore when I did something dramatic. "You're really going to leave over this?" she asked, voice syrupy. "You could have just been more careful." "Yes," I said. "I'm leaving." Mom looked like she wanted to make a show of being upset, then decided she couldn't be bothered. Dad grunted something that could have been encouragement, if you were trying very hard to hear it as such. I found a space above a laundromat 3 neighborhoods over. Tiny, cramped, with a window that opened to the alley and a radiator that clanked like an angry clock. The landlord was a kind old man named Mr. Alvarez who accepted my deposit and winked when he saw how determined I looked. "Small place, big heart," he said. I laughed then, but not because it was funny, because I needed something to break the tension in my chest. The room was smaller than my college dorm: a twin bed shoved against the wall, a second-hand desk with a wobble, peeling wallpaper, and an outlet that flickered like it weren't sure it wanted to be reliable. The shower was down the hall, paid for by quarters. I bought a tiny lamp that gave off a warm, defiant circle of light. That circle became my universe. Moving out didn't fix the ache of betrayal, it just put space between my failures and my work. The first night alone I cried until I could barely breathe. Not because I was scared, but because everything that had felt heavy and inevitable suddenly felt like raw material: shame, anger, humiliation. They were fuel. The bed in that small room caught me as I started to turn them into plans. I took odd jobs: babysitting, late-night barista shifts, a weekend gig cleaning offices, anything to stretch the rent. I ate noodles and peanut butter for a month, and learned how to make 3 different meals taste less like survival and more like strategy. I learned to be proud of the small things: when my rent cleared on time, when I sold 1 more subscription, when an angry bug in the code finally obeyed me. Pixel Nest became a secret with a pulse. I stopped talking about it to neighbors, to the woman who ran the laundromat, even to Melissa when she texted with that casual cruelty that used to sting. I set up a new code repository, never pushed anything to public places, and began the one thing no one had bothered to teach me properly: how to protect my work. I learned about version control, encryption, simple legal steps you can take without a lawyer, the little defenses that can turn a vulnerable prototype into a fortress. Every night I'd come home from shifts, curl up under the single lamp, and code until the building slept. I designed new templates, rewrote core algorithms, and built features Melissa and Brian couldn't have replicated even if they'd had my files. I stopped trying to be faster than them. I started trying to be better in ways they wouldn't see coming. I added modular tools that made Pixel Nest scalable, not just pretty. I made the AI assistant smarter, the SEO suggestions sharper, and the onboarding flow so smooth that a bakery owner could get a beautiful site in under an hour. I also started collecting evidence. Quietly. Screenshots, timestamps, email chains, anything that could prove the timeline if I ever needed to show it. My anger was clinical now, it had turned into something with a plan. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was building a case and a product that would make their theft look laughably small. There were nights I wanted to quit. There were clients who ghosted, servers that crashed, and windows that fogged with the breath of my frustration. Once I missed rent by 2 days and sat on the floor staring at the empty fridge, thinking maybe it was all a fantasy. But then a message would come through from a small business owner thanking me for saving them time and money, and I'd remember why I'd started. Every thank you stitched up the ragged parts of me. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself from scratch, you know that feeling, when you realize your worst moments aren't your end but your beginning. When you understand that sometimes, losing everything is actually finding your way. Months passed in a montage of coffee, code, and exhaustion. My hands got calluses in places I hadn't expected. My laugh grew quieter and sharper. The world kept moving on the other side of my thin wall, Melissa posting brunch pictures, Dad going to work with the same worn briefcase, Mom buying a new dress for some church function, and I let them live their version of comfortable. I had a different kind of comfort now, the blind faith that comes from doing the work even when nobody's watching. By the time I'd paid off my 3rd month's rent, Pixel Nest had a new backbone. I'd refined the business model, lined up a handful of paying beta clients, and even hacked together a lean analytics dashboard that showed user retention in glowing green numbers. I started pitching again, quietly, carefully, to people who knew their stuff and didn't care about family names. The plan was simple and brutal: build something undeniable, secure real customers and measurable traction, go public with the truth in a way that would make the theft obvious and the success impossible to ignore. This wasn't about petty revenge. It was surgical. I wanted more than to watch Melissa choke on her lies. I wanted the kind of victory that rewrote the story everyone had told about me. And then it happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind that tasted like burnt coffee and cheap determination. I'd been up all night tweaking code for Pixel Nest 2.0, barely noticing the sunrise creeping through my window. My tiny apartment smelled like instant noodles and exhaustion, but I didn't care. I was in my zone, rebuilding what they stole from me. Then, out of nowhere, an email popped up. Subject: Partnership Inquiry, Pixel Nest 2.0. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But when I opened it, I froze. It was from Kendra Lewis, an operations manager at a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago. She said she'd come across my app through a tech forum and wanted to schedule a product demo. A real company. A real opportunity. My throat went dry. I read the message twice, just to be sure it wasn't a joke. Then I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Not the kind of laugh that hides pain, but the kind that feels like sunlight cracking through a storm. I emailed her back right away, set a date, and spent the next 2 days preparing like my life depended on it. Because, in a way, it did. When demo day came, I logged into the call early. My hands were trembling, but my voice stayed steady. I walked her through everything: the clean interface, the customization tools, the real-time analytics that made Pixel Nest 2.0 stand out. Halfway through, she paused, frowning thoughtfully. "Wait," she said. "Isn't this kind of like Nest Space? We used that before, but it kept crashing." My lips curled into the smallest, calmest smile. "I've heard of them," I said softly. "But this one's different. It's the original vision, just done right." Kendra chuckled. "Well, I can see that. This is miles better. Let's talk contract." She signed with me that same week. Then another client came. Then another. Within 2 months, Pixel Nest 2.0 had enough active users to fund my rent, new equipment, and even a small website upgrade. For the first time in forever, I wasn't just surviving, I was winning. Quietly. Privately. Perfectly. And as I rose, I watched Nest Space start to crumble. At first, it was little things: customer complaints piling up online, bad reviews on app stores, posts on Reddit calling it unstable and overhyped. Then came a few tech blogs pointing out bugs and missing features. I didn't need to dig deep to know why. They'd stolen my code, but they didn't understand the soul behind it. Without me, Nest Space was a body with no heartbeat. One night, I visited their site out of curiosity, and that's when I nearly laughed out loud. Among their current clients listed on the page was Kendra's company. She'd switched to me without even realizing she was leaving the fake version behind. It was poetic. The same people who mocked me for wasting my time were slowly losing everything they stole, and they didn't even see it coming. Have you ever watched someone who hurt you begin to fall? That strange mixture of satisfaction and pity. That's how it felt, watching their stolen empire crumble while mine grew stronger with each passing day. That's when I knew it was time to strike back. I started gathering every piece of evidence, the original prototypes, the old version logs, screenshots of timestamps, emails I'd sent to Brian about the initial concept, even voice notes where I'd explained my design to Melissa. I organized everything neatly into a folder labeled Truth. Then I wrote a long, detailed statement, not a rant, not an accusation, just a clear, factual story about what happened, from the night I pitched Pixel Nest at that family dinner to the day they stole it and rebranded it as Nest Space. But I didn't post it yet. I wanted timing, precision. They were about to announce a new funding round. I wanted the world to be watching when the truth dropped. So I waited. And while I waited, I kept building. Because revenge isn't loud. Revenge is quiet, patient, and perfectly timed. I'll never forget the night I decided to press post. It was late, past midnight, the kind of quiet that feels like the whole world's holding its breath. I was sitting in my tiny apartment, a cup of cold coffee beside me, the glow from my laptop lighting up my face. My heart was steady. My mind, razor sharp. I had everything lined up, the evidence folder, the screenshots, the side-by-side code comparisons, the old emails, the family group chat where I'd first mentioned Pixel Nest. I wasn't bitter anymore, I was surgical. Focused. Ready. That week, Nest Space had just made a massive announcement, a $2 million funding round from a Silicon Valley venture group. Melissa posted a picture of herself and Brian on Instagram, champagne glasses raised, big smiles, ## self-made. I remember staring at that photo, my hand tightening around the mouse. Self-made. I almost laughed. I waited until the next morning, the same morning they were scheduled for a live-streamed investor Q&A. That's when I posted it. I uploaded my full story to Medium, titled, "They Stole My App, My Dream," and called it their own, The Truth About Nest Space. Then I attached the receipts, everything from the first mock-ups to the time-stamped commits in my code repository. I didn't name-call. I didn't rant. I just told the truth, calm, clear, undeniable. And then, I shared the link on Twitter. Just one line, for anyone curious where Nest Space really came from, here's my story. I closed my laptop after that. I didn't expect much. I just wanted to breathe again. But by afternoon, my phone was vibrating non-stop. Mentions, tags, DMs, it was everywhere. By the time I opened Twitter again, the post had over 80,000 retweets. Tech bloggers picked it up. YouTubers made videos breaking down my story. Journalists started digging. And then, someone leaked that one of Nest Space investors had quietly backed out. Melissa tried to stay calm on social media, posting, "Don't believe everything you read." But it was too late. The screenshots spoke louder than any denial. People found her old comments about me, where she'd called me lazy and unmotivated. They resurfaced them, side by side with proof that I was the real creator. By the next morning, the news had hit TechCrunch, founder accused of stealing code for Nest Space, Sources confirm internal investigation. Brian's LinkedIn profile disappeared that same day. When I saw that headline, I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just sat back and exhaled. The kind of breath that feels like release after years of holding it in. If you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or laughed at, if you've ever had someone steal your dreams, then you know the power of finally being heard. Of finally being believed. And for those who've been watching this story unfold, wondering if justice ever really comes, stay with me. Because what happened next changed everything, for me, for my family, and for anyone who's ever been told they'll never succeed. A few hours later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering. Hello. Silence. Then, a voice I knew too well. Ava, Melissa whispered. Her tone was shaky, scared, even. Why are you doing this? You're ruining everything. I smiled to myself. No, Mel. I'm not ruining anything. I'm just telling the truth. You could have talked to me first. I did. You laughed. She didn't respond. Just soft breathing on the other end, then a click. By the end of the week, Nest Space was suspended from multiple app stores. The investors pulled out completely. And when the legal letters started rolling in, Brian disappeared from the internet entirely. But for me, that was just the beginning. Because 2 weeks later, my inbox exploded again, this time with offers. Partnerships, funding proposals, speaking invitations. People wanted to work with me. The underdog. The girl who got laughed at and still built her dream from scratch. I accepted one, from a tech accelerator in Austin that specialized in supporting women-led startups. They offered me mentorship, investment, and full autonomy over Pixel Nest. The day I signed that deal, I thought about my parents. About the night they laughed at me. About Melissa's smirk across the dinner table. And for the first time, I smiled. Not out of revenge, but out of peace. They said I'd never be successful like my sister. Turns out they were right. I became more. After the TechCrunch piece, everything accelerated like a freight train with no brakes. Nest Space didn't just fizzle, it imploded. The app stores pulled the product for violations after users submitted bug reports and evidence of copied code. The headline writers smelled blood, and they didn't stop biting. Investors who'd toasted champagne with Melissa and Brian started calling lawyers. The lead VC announced they were freezing disbursements while they audited Nest Space intellectual property. Term sheets evaporated. The $2 million that Melissa had tweeted about was reduced to a rumor. The overdrafts, the loans, the seed money Brian bragged about, it was all paper on fire. Melissa called me the night it all began to fall apart. She sounded small, the way children do after a bad dream. Ava, please stop this. We can fix it. I can explain to the investors. Her voice cracked like someone trying to hold a wall from collapsing. I listened. I didn't hang up. I let her talk herself into a corner. Then, with my thumb on the phone like it was an instrument that could measure the truth, I said, I told you the truth when you laughed at me. I told you I was building this. You didn't listen. She sobbed then, real and ugly. Please, Mom and Dad have mortgaged everything into this. They believe in us. We're going to lose the house. Something cold settled in my chest, but not the hot, blinding fury from the early days. This was quieter, cleaner, consequences. I remembered their laughter at the dinner table, the way my father said, "You'll never be successful like your sister," and how my mother had smiled when Melissa mocked me. I remembered being told to contribute, or move out as if my life's work was a child's toy. Then you should have thought about that before you built a house on someone else's foundation, I said. You made your choices. If you've ever been wronged by someone who only apologized when they got caught, you know that hollow feeling. That moment when you realize they're not sorry for what they did, they're sorry it backfired, then tell me in the comments section. The next few weeks were a public spectacle. Melissa was suspended from her marketing role when internal emails, ones where she'd forwarded some of my original mock-ups and complained about my flaky timeline, surfaced in the press. Her professional network shrank overnight. The company she worked for cut ties to avoid reputational damage. She was out of a job before she could even finish clearing her desk. My parents called me in a flurry of different tones, pleading, indignant, confused. Their pride had a price, apparently, and when it came due, they reached for me as if the daughter they'd humiliated could do the impossible, stitch their lives back together. Dad left a voicemail that started with, "We're so proud of what you've built," which was the same sentence he'd never once said with sincerity. Mom texted, then sent a photo of their mortgage statement with a caption that read, "We made mistakes." Melissa tried everything: emails, apologies, mournful Instagram posts about learning lessons. Brian hired a lawyer and vanished from the feeds. But the calls that mattered were the ones that came later, the ones that found me after I'd signed the accelerator papers, after I'd hired my first 6 employees, after PixelNest's user base tripled and my first real round of funding came through from people who'd actually done their homework. They reached me not as family, but as climbers clawing back into the world they'd built with my stolen hands. The first time Dad showed up at my office, he tried to be casual like he'd just dropped in to return a borrowed book. He stood awkwardly in the lobby while my assistant buzzed me. He looked older, smaller in the suit that used to make him feel important. "Dad," I said when I saw him. My voice was even, almost gentle, but the warmth I had once felt for him was an old thing now, like a book I'd finished reading. He put his hands together, the way people do when they are asking for forgiveness without knowing the words. "Ava, we made mistakes. We didn't see it. Melissa's been through so much. We want to make things right." He expected my arms to open. He expected the daughter he'd berated to be the balm for all his errors. He expected the same little girl who had begged for approval. I looked at him for a long time, listening to the hum of people moving about the office, the soft clack of keyboards like a civilized heartbeat. I thought about the nights I cried on that bed while they laughed in the dining room. I thought about the way Melissa had smirked when she told me she'd give me a job at Nest Space like it was a charity case. I thought about everything I'd rebuilt by myself in a closet-sized apartment while they sipped wine and rolled their eyes. "You want to make things right?" I asked slowly. "That's not how this works." His face fell. He tried again, fumbling, "We'll help. We can find a way to." "You didn't help when you should have," I said. "You didn't defend me when it mattered. You chose their version of the story because it was easier. There's no rewind for that." The pleading turned into a kind of silence that felt heavy and final. He left without another word. I watched him walk down the street, a man who had lost the one child who'd once wanted nothing more than his approval. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do isn't forgiving those who hurt you, it's protecting yourself from being hurt again. If you've been holding on to guilt for setting boundaries with toxic people, remember this: forgiveness is a gift, not an obligation. And some gifts need to be earned. Melissa sent messages begging for forgiveness, all the flavors of remorse rolled into a messy, public exhibition. I read them, yes. I did not reply. She called once and left a voicemail apologizing, saying she'd been so scared of losing everything. I listened to it twice, then deleted it. My revenge had never been about watching them suffer for suffering's sake. It was about justice, about the world recognizing what had been taken from me and correcting the record. Once that was done, the rest was consequences, legal actions, ruined reputations, careers, and yes, a family house on the line because of bad bets and stolen ideas. When my mother emailed asking if I would meet her for coffee, she wrote, "I'm sorry. We were wrong. Come home for dinner this Sunday." I saved the message and then archived it. I didn't need her apology in an inbox. I didn't want to see her face after what she'd let them do to me. Forgiveness is not an obligation. It's a choice. I chose to protect myself instead. I chose to keep moving forward, to build something that would last. I chose not to be the person who patches things up to make others comfortable again. So when they came crawling, after the banks called, after the house was in foreclosure proceedings, after Melissa's references dried up and she handed me a box of things from her old desk asking if I could help place her somewhere, I shut the door. They left voicemails that turned from pleading to bargaining. They sent emails with awkward offers, "We can be quiet investors." They tried to barter with what little dignity they had left. None of it moved me. I had a life to run, a team to lead, a product to scale. I had clients who believed in me because I showed up. I had a small army of people whose livelihoods depended on my focus. I had a story that people had rallied behind. I owed them nothing. Years later, when Pixelnest was mentioned in the same sentence as innovation and resilience, when my name was on panels and in interviews and my parents watched from the audience of their quiet, altered lives, they sometimes looked at me with a complicated mixture of pride and regret. But those were not for me, those were their reckonings. When people ask me now if I forgave them, I say the truth, I didn't. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. I built a life beyond the dining room's laughter, and I kept that life for myself. They taught me a lesson I never wanted to learn. Never hand your dreams to people who would turn them into someone else's trophies. And that lesson, brutal and bloody as it was, made me unstoppable. If you've been moved by this story, if you've ever been underestimated, mocked, or told you weren't enough, I want you to remember one thing: sometimes, the people who don't believe in you are the ones who push you to prove exactly how powerful you really are. Revenge isn't about destroying others. True revenge is becoming so magnificent that their laughter turns to silence, their mockery to regret. True revenge is living well, building empires, and walking away from those who couldn't see your worth. My name is everywhere now. My success speaks for itself. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm working in my corner office with the city lights spread out below me like stars, I think back to that family dinner, to that laughter that once cut me so deep. And I smile. Not because I'm still angry, but because I know now what they couldn't see then. That I was never meant to be successful like my sister. I was meant to be extraordinary. If my story touched you, then like, share and subscribe for more stories of strength, resilience, and pushing through whatever struggles you may be facing in life.